Welcome to the weekly markets video. I'm Tracy Alloway, US financial correspondent for the Financial Times, and I'm here with Nicole Bullock, who is our US equities correspondent. Now, we're just entering the month of August, which traditionally is a very quiet time on Wall Street. That said, last month, July, was very, very busy for one segment of the market, initial public offerings, or IPOs. Nicole, could you maybe walk us through what we've seen in terms of IPOs over the past week or so?
So the last week looks like it's shaping up to be the busiest week since 1 week in 2007. So what we're seeing is a bit of the rush before we head into the back half of August, which is traditionally the slowdown period on Wall Street.
Right. And now, do you expect August to be quite quiet, given that we've had all this activity in July, or what are you anticipating for IPOs?
Well, the expectations are that as we get into the latter back half of August, things will slow down a bit. But what we've seen throughout the year is that it's just been, actually just a very busy year throughout for IPOs. So what we've seen in the last week has really just been part of that broader trend. So if you look at it, I believe we're shaping up to be the busiest year to date since 2000, with nearly 200 individual deals and about $45 billion amount. So on both of those measures, it's the busiest year to date since 2000.
Busiest year since 2000, which of course was at the height of the tech bubble, as many people remember. What's sort of driving activity in the IPO market this time around? Is it the same sort of exuberance that we saw in the tech bubble more than a decade ago, or is it different this time?
So the IPO market has been strong for a little bit now, not just this year. Even last year was pretty strong. And one big driver has just been that we've had a strong equities market. Until a bit of a hiccup this past week, we've had the S&P 500 touching new highs, and obviously all of that just creates a lot of enthusiasm about equities, and it means that companies can sell at pretty good valuations. The other thing that we saw happen this year is that the U.S. economy was a little disappointing in the early part of the year, and that kind of thing generally has investors looking to smaller, higher growth sectors in order to boost their portfolios. So if you don't think the rising tide will lift all boats and you have all equities producing strong gains as they did last year, you might start to look at smaller companies or growth companies, which includes IPOs, to try to get a little bit more oomph in your portfolio.
Right. So, and are we starting to see investors kind of differentiate between different companies that are coming to market for the first time?
Well, we've seen, I would say, and that definitely played out in the past week, but we've seen for the past, I would say, couple of months, a much more selective IPO investor really picking and choosing among the deals, being a little bit harder hitting on price, and just looking for certain types of characteristics. So, visibility on revenue growth. I mean, profitability is always great in an IPO because they do tend to be, earlier stage companies, but it doesn't have to be profitability. It can be, as I said, a bit more visibility on revenues or a great market position, that sort of thing.
Right. So a bumper year for IPOs, it looks like. Are there any big ones that are coming up that our viewers should be aware of?
Well, certainly the focus of this year and maybe many years to come will be the IPO expected after Labor Day for Alibaba, the Chinese e-commerce company.
Right.
So this is expected to be somewhere around 20 billion. So in order to put that in context, you can think that in the past week we had an IPO from Synchrony Financial, which is the credit card business that's being spun off from General Electric, and that happened to be the biggest IPO listed on a U.S. exchange this year, and it was a little under 3 billion. So if you're looking at somewhere between 20 and 30 billion for an IPO, just one company, and all year to date, we've had about 45 billion. So it just gives you a sense of how massive this deal is, and there's tremendous focus on it. It's really just captivating the market, and so once we get back from Labor Day, things are going to jump right up as that roadshow is expected to get underway, and everybody's going to be really focused on how that IPO plays out.
All right. Well, it looks like we're heading for a relatively quiet August in the midst of what could well be a massive year for the entire IPO market. Nicole, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll be back next week.